This can't be right. It was a trick. It had to be. Yet, after spending hours walking around, Naya couldn't figure out what the trick was. Hoban's western quarter may as well have been a different world compared to the city's southern and eastern districts. It hadn't quite returned to normal, yet, but the sense of growing desperation that Naya remembered when she last visited to buy a pair of straw sandals may as well have been her imagination. As Say noted, the people looked relatively healthy and content with their situation. Not only that, the attitude of the residents was markedly strange. Strange as far as royalist-managed cities and towns in the north went, anyway. The pressure that the royalists applied through the enforcement of their policies created a distinct change in people that was impossible to miss. They grew more protective of themselves and their families, becoming closed and suspicious of everyone else. Moral boundaries slowly crumbled away, and wrong turned into right or at least necessary. In short, the Western Quarter was healing, its citizens returning to what was considered normal behavior in the Holy Kingdom of Roble. While it was heartening to see that there was hope for those who had suffered under royalist rule, something else about it bothered her that she couldn't quite put her finger on. "It's like you want to see them suffer," Say said. "No, it's not that," Naya replied. "It's..." A patrol appeared around a corner and turned toward them. Naya and Say ducked into the doorway of a shop to let them by. Naya clutched her bow tightly as they eyed her in passing. Say punched her in the arm. "Ow!" Naya cried and rubbed her arm. "What was that for?" The bar didn't reply until the patrol disappeared behind the bend of the street. "Do you know what you look like?" A nervous girl in a budget bandit mask clutching a weapon. "You're lucky you're in Roble, anywhere else and they'd have brought you in for questioning." "It's not budget," Naya protested, lowering her bow. "Well, maybe it is. Anyway, I think there's something wrong with this place." They resumed their walk down the street. Men and women smiled and greeted Say. They actively avoided eye contact with Naya. "You were just thinking that because of the way people are treating you." "I am used to it," Naya replied, "so it's not that. I can't help but think that the woman from the Eastern Quarter was right. This is all some kind of trick by House Rastello." "Why would you say that?" "Because it's House Rastello," Naya said. "What's weird is that you don't find this weird. Most of the city is suffering and this place is just fine. Unlike the Prime Estates or the Water Gardens, there's no reason for it to be." Say looked pointedly at the groups of conservative retainers crowding the street. Many were chatting amicably with the locals as they browsed the shops and market stands. "It should be because of that, right? They're trying to get in good with the conservatives." "I still can't believe that the conservatives would overlook House Rastello's past," Naya said. "The penalty for murder is supposed to be death." "For commoners, maybe," Say said. "It's even worse for nobles," Naya told her. "A scandal like that could ruin their houses." "That's different." The bard frowned. They reached the market plaza in the center of the Western Quarter, where the aromas of food being prepared for lunch wafted in the wind. It was yet another difference from the other parts of the city. The people here could actually afford to sell food without dying of starvation. "What do you mean by different?" Naya asked. "In other countries," Say said, "it's usually impossible for normal people to pin crimes on nobles. They're mostly untouchable because they're both the lawmakers and enforcers in their own fiefs, and they're usually never dumb enough to have their deeds exposed to anyone that can do anything about them." "Really? I thought maybe Riestais was like that, but not other places." "Even the Empire is like that," Say said. "They are sort of famous for deposing nobles, but it's only the nobles that the Emperor decides he doesn't like. He's got a big list of reasons that he can pick from to get anyone in trouble for, plus he arbitrarily imposes laws that act like traps specifically for the people he wants to get rid of." That sounded like what any average aristocrat did. Unlike Roble and Riestais, however, it didn't sound like there was anyone to keep Emperor Jerkniv's power in check. "Furthermore," the bard continued, "the law isn't equally accessible to everyone in practice. Those with the greatest command of the law gain the greatest benefits from it. The vast majority of people in the Empire can't even read. They don't even know what the laws are beyond some of the ones that directly affect their daily lives. Everything else is just some vague idea of what's right and wrong. The imperial administration is just a faceless bureaucracy to the Empire's citizens, and imperial propaganda dictates what is and isn't reality in Baharuth." "Well, it's not like that here," Naya told the bard. "If people feel that they've been wronged, they can go to the temples. Usually, it's just through speaking with a local priest, and the priest reports the case to the Holy Order. The Holy Order's judicial authority comes from the crown, so it supersedes the authority of the nobility. Then how did the North get this bad? Say asked. 2 reasons, Naya answered. You probably already know them from when we spoke to the authorities in Lloyd's. The first is that the crown is endorsing the actions of the nobility. Secondly, even if they wanted to do something about it, they're so pitifully short-staffed that they can't. As they watched the late afternoon crowds go about their business, Naya spotted a familiar face behind one of the stands. She and Say joined the line for the stand, awaiting their turn to speak with its merchant. Display cases lined with bracelets, rings, necklaces, and pieces of silverware glittered in the sunlight. I know I gave you some money, Say said, but that doesn't mean you can go and buy jewelry with it. I didn't even know you liked jewelry. Just because I don't wear any doesn't mean I don't like it, Naya replied. No, wait. The woman running the stand is someone from the Corps. I wanted to speak with her. When it came their turn, the merchant gave them a blank stare. Hello, Mrs. Naya smiled. Miss Baraha? The same. I haven't seen you since the victory celebrations. Oh, you know how it is, Mrs. said. Things are busy now, especially. Was there something that caught your eye? No. I just happened to spot you and thought I'd come and say hello. Well, it's good to see you too. If you don't mind, though, I need to take care of my customers here. Of course. Eh? Mrs. didn't spare her another look, turning to greet the armsman behind Naya with a smile. Naya walked away in befuddlement. Her treatment was drastically different from her reception from Corps members in Rimian or even Lloyd's. She absently made her way out of the plaza, back east along Fire Street. Something was definitely wrong. It's too early to go back, Say noted. We're not going back just yet, Naya told the bard. I just wanted to check something over here. Naya examined the storefronts along their path, searching for a silversmith. When she found one, she peeked into the window, looking for Mr. Has anyone told you that you have a unique talent for looking suspicious? Say asked. I just don't want to interrupt anyone's work if I don't need to. She fell over with a shout when she turned her attention back to the window and found a face staring back at her. The men and women nearby stopped to stare. Red-faced, Naya dashed into the shop, nearly tripping on her bow in the process. Mr. She bobbed her head in greeting. Good afternoon. I thought a damn rogue was peeking into the store, Mr. said. Sorry, Naya said. I wasn't sure whether I had the right shop or not. What can I do for you, Miss Baraha? Like his wife, Mr. addressed Naya with a demeanor unlike any she had experienced elsewhere. The only thing that was clear was that the man was impatient to get back to work. I met your wife just now, Naya said. So I thought I'd drop by and see how you were doing. Busy, with all that's happened. So I saw, Naya said. How has the Sorcerer King's wisdom helped you with that? Not much, to be honest. Huh? The man sighed at her unspoken reaction. Look, Mr. Baraha, he said. What you talked about during the war made sense because we were fighting savages and worse. After the war, we returned to civilized society. All that strength we gained during the war didn't matter much in our daily lives and we're glad that it doesn't. You are? Of course. Mr. replied with a snort. Months ago, you said that we must become strong or accept the justice of another. The latter was the obvious choice. Naya frowned as her reasoning was turned upside down on her. Why would you say that the latter is the obvious choice? She asked. Because, Mr. answered, put in different terms, becoming strong to uphold one's justice is the exact same thing that savage tribes do. Might makes right. We're better than that. What serves the people of the Holy Kingdom is the justice of the Holy Kingdom, not some barbaric notion of imposing what you want on others by force and calling it justice. But don't you think that the justice of the Holy Kingdom has failed us? The silversmith regarded her with a puzzled look. What crazy nonsense is that? He said, we were facing powers beyond our reckoning back during the war. That doesn't mean the Holy Kingdom's justice failed. What you're saying is as ludicrous as claiming that a tidal wave wiping out a village is a failure of the Holy Kingdom's justice. Just because things didn't work out nicely back then doesn't mean that we should abandon what it is that makes us the people of Robley. What about after the war? Naya asked. The people of Hoban suffered so much. It was completely unreasonable. Everyone knew we were in for hard times after the war, Mr. answered. But things got better far more quickly than I imagined they would. All we had to do was hold a steady course. Keep the faith. Everything's better now, and it wasn't because we went off and decided to chase some savage notions of strength. Naya stared, dumbfounded, at the silversmith. Was the Sorcerer King's wisdom so easy to cast aside? If that's all you've come for, Mr. said, then I should get back to work. Thank you for your visit, Miss Baraha. With that, the man left the counter and returned to his workshop. Naya remained in a state of shock long after she shuffled back out onto the street. I don't understand. The Sorcerer King's wisdom was the truth. He was the truth. Justice. It should have been obvious to anyone who had witnessed His Majesty in person. Yet, Mr. and Mrs. had done that. They had witnessed both battles between Ainzulgaon and Yaldabaoth, and many others besides. How could he say what he had? I don't get it, Naya said. It doesn't make any sense. It sounded reasonable to me, Say said. At least if you look at things from his perspective. Even if they suffered, they expected to suffer, and that suffering ended far more quickly than they expected. In other words, Naya said, House Rastello tricked them. Huh? They did it on purpose. Playing with people's hearts and minds to get them on their side. How evil can you get? It was all clear to her now. House Rastello was evil through and through. They were so evil that they could turn good men and women away from the Sorcerer King's wisdom. Not a single person noticed their insidious schemes because they were distracted by other things. She had to stop them somehow, yet all of her strength was marshaled along the northern coast. Speaking with the people in the other parts of Hobans is going to be more important than I thought, Naya said. What are you going to say? I'm not sure yet, Naya replied. But I have to make sure that the Sorcerer King's wisdom isn't forsaken in Hobans. If we don't muster up some resistance against House Rastello, they'll turn everyone away from the truth. Whatever she said and did, she would have to be careful about it. She had few allies and the capital was crawling with nobles and their men. Enacting any forceful means would not only have them quickly crush any violent individuals, but also risk showing people like Mr. that they were right about the Sorcerer King's wisdom being nothing but base savagery. A scream jerked Naya out of her thoughts. The flow of traffic froze at the sound, and a gap in the crowd opened to reveal a woman lying motionless on the cobblestones. What the? Naya scanned the surroundings, her head filled with thoughts of rogues and assassins. Oh gods, another woman cried, he's here. It's the smiling demon. Another opening appeared in the crowd, created by a mass of men and women pushing to get away from something. She followed their fearful gazes to a rooftop nearby, where a fair-haired young man looked down at the crowd. That's him? It must be. Even from her distance, she could tell that everything he wore was exceptional in quality. His armor alone probably rivaled what Naya's father once wore. No Mirag would appear so exquisitely adorned. Naya's hand went down to the quiver at her right hip, fingers finding the fletchings of an arrow. Her gaze turned hard as the nightmarish aftermath of Iago Lauser's assassination flashed through her mind. So this is the famous demon, a voice carried over the panic. I see nothing but a green boy dressed in finery by his upstart masters. A knight in unfamiliar livery stepped into the opening below the rooftops. The ring of steel filled the air as he drew his long sword and pointed it at the assassin. You've plagued our fair capital long enough, demon. Come down here so I can send you to the gods. As if he'll come down and fight fairly. The knight was an idiot, but he served as a useful distraction. Naya knocked an arrow to her bow, taking a deep breath before focusing on eliminating her nemesis. Lower your weapon before I send you to the gods. A familiar and highly unwelcome voice stopped Naya before she raised her bow. Another individual in shining plate armor appeared in the clearing, bearing the scapular of the Holy Order. Naya's stomach churned upon seeing the unmistakable bob cut of the Holy Order's former Grand Master. How can you ask me to lower my blade against this scum, Sister Custodio? The knight said. Is the Holy Order siding with an assassin? I don't see any assassins. The knight scoffed. Everyone here knows that he's an assassin. How can you doubt so many? Because 99 out of 100 of you weren't even in Hobans until recently, Remedios said in a bored-sounding voice. Having a bunch of people come up and claim that a thief-taker is an assassin doesn't make it any less true than before. If you want to challenge the ruling of the court, then do it in court, not in the streets. I won't suffer any vigilantes on my watch." Naya shook her head. Remedios was just as blind as ever. During the war, she arbitrarily accused the Sorcerer King of being in collusion with Yaldabaoth. Now, she denied the existence of a vile assassin right in front of her face. So many people couldn't be wrong about either of them. "Move along, everyone," Remedios called out. "There's nothing interesting to see here." The assassin smiled an evil smile as the crowd dispersed. Naya joined the flow of people, keeping an eye on the assassin as he made his way over the rooftops. The night might have failed to bring him to justice, but she wouldn't so easily lose her quarry. She shadowed the fiend back west along the avenue, weaving through the pedestrians as she struggled to keep up with him. Occasionally he stopped to terrorize the poor citizens. Infuriatingly, all of the House Rastello patrols seemed genuinely amused by their reaction, doing nothing to help. She should have expected it of them, but their conduct disgusted her nonetheless. Naya crossed the western plaza, where the assassin stopped to look down on the market. He seemed intent on examining the area for an extended period, so it seemed like a good opportunity to take him down. She stepped into the shadow of an alley gazing intently at her target. "What are you looking at?" A brown-haired young woman in a leather worker's apron appeared before Naya. She looked somewhere between herself and Saiyan age. Naya tried to ignore her, but she only stepped closer. "I haven't seen you two around here before," the young woman said. "There are a lot of new people in the city," Naya replied. "What's your business here?" the woman asked. "Is that any business of yours?" Naya answered. "You are in the Lanka district. I'm a leather worker." "Of course it's my business. And why are you wearing a mask?" "Arg, so annoying. What the hell is her problem?" The assassin started moving again. Naya moved to pursue him, but the woman got in the way. "You can't have him," she said. "He's mine. I don't care how pretty your friend is, either." Naya's mind stopped working for a moment. What in the gods' names was she talking about? She tried to get around the woman, but she kept blocking her path. Naya's frustration exploded when the assassin left her sight. "Look," she scowled, "I don't. Ricardo." The woman waved her hand in the air. "There's a suspicious woman in a mask over here." TCH. Naya retreated into the alley and quickly made her way out to the western quarter. Not only had she lost her mark, but it was too late to track him down. The meeting with her followers in the eastern quarter was coming up soon. "That woman," Naya fumed. "I can't believe she thought we were after him romantically." "I know, right?" Say replied. "What's so good about that guy, anyway?" She couldn't agree more. The woman must have been a naive idiot who was blinded by his looks. Or maybe it was because he was dangerous. Some women considered that sort of excitement a tempting prospect. When they arrived behind Mr. Abrigo's workshop in the eastern quarter, Naya found a small crowd of people gathered in the tiny courtyard. Many were familiar faces that greeted her with smiles and nods. "Miss Baraha, it's good to see you again. Abrigo told us you had something to say." "Yes, I do," Naya replied with a nod. "But, first, is there anyone else on their way?" "Courtyard's small," Mr. Abrigo said, "so we figured we'd prioritize gathering members of the Corps from around the quarter." Even with what they had, the place was packed, so it was a good call. "I see," Naya said. "I'll speak to the people in the northern quarter tomorrow." On a related note, does anyone know any Corps members living in the western quarter? The people in the crowd exchanged looks. Most of them shook their heads. While they all lived in the same city, the people were divided into communities defined by guilds and professional relationships. One could live in a single district for their entire lives without ever setting foot outside of it, though she didn't think anyone actually did that. "Is there something in particular you wanted to ask about, Miss Baraha?" "Yes, as a matter of fact. I went to the western quarter and found that there are Corps members who have turned their backs on justice." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Naya sent her grim gaze around the courtyard. "I'm glad you all feel that way," she said. "I was shocked, personally. I had no idea how to respond." After some thought, however, I realized that the answer was a simple one. "Though it grieves me to say this, some members of the Sorcerer King Rescue Corps have returned to their wicked ways. They have embraced sin." But that can't be," a woman cradling her child cried. They all witnessed the truth with us. How did it happen? A man in a tailor's outfit asked. It happened because they were attacked, Naya answered. Attacked? Yes. Attacked. Since the end of the war, I have come to realize that our war has only begun. Our war is not one that is solely fought with bows and spears, it is a war against the ways of weakness that permeate the Holy Kingdom. That is how we lost those members. The powers that rule Roble create conditions that twist the hearts and minds of the people. Under those conditions, they wish to tell us how powerless we are, that it's better to return to sin and live under them. They want us to be weak, to be sinners. Because it is easy to rule over the weak. Because people who are convinced that they are powerless are infinitely easier to dominate than ones who refuse to accept every lie that they build upon that concession. Heads nodded slowly as Naya spoke. It was truly fortunate that she was able to say what she had before any more damage was done. What should we do? Someone asked from the window above. Do we have to fight that huge army camped outside the city? No, Naya replied. That's obviously not a good idea right now. As I said, ours is a war against the very society that drives us into weakness. The first victory in that war must be won within ourselves. Sadly, this is a battle that our enemy is more well versed in than we are. Their strategies have been cultivated over generations to turn the Holy Kingdom into what it is today. My best advice to everyone here is simple: keep the Sorcerer King's wisdom close to your heart and turn away from sin. Do not try to bear the weight of our enemies' attacks alone. Look to each other and cultivate your strength together. They are bound to do something if they notice what they're doing isn't working, someone said. What will we do if they come after us physically? Naya shook her head, and the people around her visibly deflated. I can only pray that they don't. But the chance of that is low. If anything, those who would suppress us must still observe the laws of the Holy Kingdom. They won't be attacking anyone in broad daylight. The most we should expect is harassment. And if that harassment is so bad it makes things unlivable, then gather your families and head north. We have many allies gathered there, but they can't move because of the unknown threat that lurks offshore. Finding us will be easy if you go to Lloyd's. From there, you'll be directed to the many places that we've built in Sierra Norte. You've built places for us? Mr. Abrigo asked. Naya smiled and nodded. Planning ahead had certainly paid off. Indeed, she said. The Corps has not remained idle while our members have come under attack. If push comes to shove, we will fight. Mark my words, this war will not end until we are all free to follow the wisdom of the Sorcerer King. Free to follow the path of justice. What in the name of the Sorcerer King is the Sorcerer King's wisdom? Liam frowned at the small gathering in the secluded courtyard below him. Over the past few days, stirrings of a different sort were manifesting in Hobans, characterized by small groups gathered out of the notice of royalist street patrols. Crazy, huh? Ames said. Are they all like this? Liam asked. Pretty much, the thief-taker replied. At first, I thought it was just people getting together for normal stuff, but then I started hearing some familiar things. He looked over at the man standing on the rooftop beside him. You've heard this message before? Yeah, Ames replied. It was a thing that started during the war. Some people formed a unit of irregulars called the Sorcerer King Rescue Corps. Why did they call themselves that? They follow the teachings of someone close to him during the war. I wouldn't take it too seriously, though. A girl I knew invited me to one of their meetings, once. That was probably my most disturbing experience during the war, and that's saying a lot. It's like someone gathered all of the desperate, disgruntled, and mentally disturbed together and turned it into an unofficial organization. That much, Liam could see. Mrs. Lynham taught him that people became psychologically vulnerable when exposed to various hardships and experiences they weren't prepared for. This knowledge wasn't exclusive to Ijania, as demonstrated by the sight before him. Do you think that masked girl believes in what she's saying? Liam asked. Beats me, Ames shrugged. Either way, it's a bad thing. She's either exploiting those poor, vulnerable people or purposely spreading that madness she's spewing. Liam nodded grimly in response, but he wasn't sure which was worse. The former was just a thing that could happen anywhere, the latter, he couldn't figure out what to call. To begin with, he wasn't aware of any sort of wisdom being officially endorsed by the Sorcerer King. His Majesty was a pretty hands-off guy when it came to everyday things. Everyone was left to do what they were supposed to be doing, and Iron Zul'Gaun was reportedly content so long as his realm and followers were prosperous and happy. It was much as the scriptures said about the last time the gods walked amongst their people. The wisdom itself didn't seem like wisdom at all. Part of it he had seen before. It made even less sense now that he heard more. "Looks like they're finishing up for tonight," Ames said, stepping over to the other side of the rooftop. "Thanks for showing me," Liam replied. "I thought you might want to know. You think we'll have to do anything about this? Us, specifically?" "I don't think so. This is more something for the street patrols, and it's not even in our jurisdiction. Sir Jorge will have us check up on them once in a while at most. I'll go and see what he has to say about it." They made their way back out of the northern quarter, returning to House Rastello's jurisdiction in the west. Ames resumed his duties while Liam informed Sir Jimena that he was going back to the camp. There was little question about what he was up to, as the trust he had earned with House Rastello gave him pretty much all the freedom he could ask for. Sir Jorge had even started suggesting that a knighthood was on the horizon. "Liam." He turned his head at Nat's voice, finding the girl smiling at him from the highway outside Rimian Gate. She was dressed in her usual outfit, which consisted of a leather worker's apron over a maroon dress. Nat took his arm as soon as he reached her. "You weren't headed into the city?" Liam asked. "It can wait," Nat answered. "Where did you go?" "Ames took me to the northern quarter to look at some weird thing." "Weird thing?" Nat frowned. "Yeah. A gathering of people listening to a girl in a tattered mask. You shouldn't go anywhere near that girl," Nat told her. "She's dangerous." Now it was Liam's turn to frown. "Do you know her?" "No," Nat replied, "but I caught her following you around the other day." "Really?" He rarely concealed himself within House Rastello's jurisdiction now, as being seen helped more with keeping order than remaining unseen. It looked like he had grown complacent with how peaceful his job had been. "Really?" Nat nodded. "She was staring at you with her beady eyes, like this." Nat made an absurd face. Liam stared silently at the girl, at least until her expression crumbled and she looked away with a blush. "Why would she be following me around wearing that kind of face?" Liam asked. "I don't know. She's probably crazy." Going by what he had learned of the masked girl, Nat probably wasn't wrong about her claim. "I see," Liam said. "Well, I don't plan on hanging around any crazy people. How's work?" "Busy," Nat replied. "Well, June is busy. She even took on an apprentice to help out around the stall." "You are able to keep up with all the new sales?" "We raised prices so things are only a bit faster than before. There are just a lot more people to deal with. With what happened to the trade fleet, the armsmen arriving from the south are all scrambling to get their hands on good armor. Some of those guys have a lot of money, so I got Raquel to enchant a suit. I was headed into the city to pick it up just now. It'll sell for at least 10 times more than a regular one." "Did enchanted armor cost that much?" Liam had purchased his own set, but it was all done in barter for stuff that was selling for wacky prices, and Nat had taken over negotiating for half of it. "Wait a minute," Liam said. "Isn't Raquel busy with Royal Army contracts now?" Unlike leatherworking, where one could fashion multiple pieces at the same time because there was a lot of waiting for stuff to set and dry, enchanting a single item required the complete focus of the enchanter. "It's not like there's a deadline for them," Nat told him. "The contract is basically a permanent offer with how much the Royal Army needs. They take what they can get at the agreed-upon price from whoever can provide what they want. If I offer her a better deal, they can't complain." "I guess that makes sense, but do you think anyone will buy the enchanted armor?" "June says that someone will," Nat replied. "I don't think she's wrong. Even if the regular armsmen can't afford it, there are a lot of nobles and knights running around who can. We'll put it up for auction at the stand and you'll see how many people bid for it. Once we sell one, the next one will be even more popular." "Are you sure?" "That sounds like the exact opposite of the supply and demand stuff that you two always talk about." Not really. It's more like people don't know it's available, so they don't really think about it. Magic items are like that, right? Everyone knows that they exist and they admire them when they're mentioned in stories or when they see them on adventurers and famous people. People dream of getting their hands on one, but they also know that it's probably impossible. Showing that they can get it should mean all that untapped demand is unleashed. When she put it that way, it made for a compelling case. Before everything had happened with the Sorceress Kingdom, Liam would have never imagined that he would one day possess the equipment that he did now. Common sense for most people dictated that it was an impossibility, as Nat said. In that case, Liam said, you are going to have a lot of money. What are you going to do with it? I'm not sure, Nat replied. I was saving up to buy interesting stuff from the trade fleet, but now they're gone. That's part of the reason why I ordered the enchantment. Money just sitting around doesn't do us any good, but there's a limit to what we can do with it right now. Raquel's the only enchanter that we know. What about taking on apprentices? Apprentices? Nat laughed. That's crazy. I thought the requirement was that you had to be a master. The workshop puts out beyond masterwork items, right? It does, but it's not as simple as that. The guild recognizes the workshop. They don't recognize me as a master even though I'm the only one working for the workshop. Even if they did, it'd be hard to find any apprentices. That's silly, Liam said. There are thousands of people looking for work and there must be at least some people you've impressed. Nat's smile disappeared. She pressed her cheek against his shoulder, hugging his arm tight. You are probably the only person I know that thinks that way, she said. Well, maybe Raquel, too. Everyone else, I'm a woman, Liam. Apprentices wouldn't listen to me even if they did sign on. But I've seen more than a few women with apprentices. Seamstresses and stuff. It might look like that on the surface, Nat told him, but those apprentices work for the master of the workshop. The women just happen to be married to them and it's not guaranteed that the apprentices will listen. I've seen plenty of arrangements like that before and they're filled with problems. Sometimes it's so bad that the apprentices undermine the workshop because they're angry that they have to work under a woman. It's just not worth it. Didn't you say that June picked up an apprentice? Merchants are different. You should know that. Liam sighed. It was hard to break through cultural barriers when everything about a culture reinforced them. One might think that the residents of a city would be more open-minded when it came to new ideas, but he discovered many pitfalls along the way during his time with Nat. Much like rural society, urban society was bound by contracts, and those contracts were both defined and enforced by laws. One couldn't just enter a trade because they felt like it. If, for instance, a nameless orphan like Liam wanted to become a glassblower, he had to find a workshop with available masters that would take him on. Doing so involved signing an apprentice's contract, which was basically an arrangement where training and room and board were provided in exchange for upwards of 8 years of labor. Of course, he wouldn't be paid a daily wage until he graduated and became a journeyman. Laws protected apprentices from having their contracts arbitrarily cancelled, so workshops were stuck with them unless they committed a major crime. This made the situation that Nat described an untenable one. She didn't want to be stuck with a rebellious apprentice for nearly a decade. Furthermore, that apprentice would end up being a poor craftsman which would, in turn, reflect poorly on her as a master. The source of that rebelliousness was rooted in the fact that, like their rural counterparts, men inherited over women. In short, both men and women expected men to be in charge. Just as children were considered extensions of their families, women were extensions of their husbands or the houses that they served. Working under a woman was like being a servant of a servant, and an apprentice would demand better for their time. Merchants like June were different because they didn't own land. They neither held the contract to a rural tenancy nor did they own something like a workshop. Even warehouses were only leased by merchants from whoever owned them, and plots for market stalls were similarly leased from landlords. Though one wouldn't think so from the interactions of a bustling marketplace, merchants were pretty much a step up from slaves. In terms of the overall social hierarchy of the northern human countries, they were technically lower than peasants. Society would swiftly turn on any merchant who aspired or pretended to be greater than anything that they were. This, combined with the fact that anyone who embarked on the path of a merchant pretty much accepted that they would essentially be near the bottom of society, was why June could sign on apprentices and not have problems with them. Liam parted ways with Nat once they arrived at the labor camp's administrative center. To his surprise, he found Lord Rastello's personal retinue standing guard around the overseer's tent. "I'm here to see Sir Jorge," he told the company captain. "Is he busy?" "What's your business?" the captain asked. "There's a strange person stirring up the people of the city," Liam answered. "I wanted to consult with Sir Jorge about it." "Just a moment." The captain turned and disappeared into the tent. A minute later, he reappeared and jerked his head at the entrance. "Go ahead," he said. "They are having dinner at the moment, so don't go ruining the mood." "How would I know if I'm going to ruin the mood?" He kept his question to himself and entered the tent. Within it, Sir Jorge was sitting at a table with Lord Rastello and several of his knights. "Well," Lord Rastello leaned back in his chair with a smirk, "if it isn't the smiling demon himself." "Good evening, Lord Rastello. I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner." "I was just bemoaning the scarcity of entertainment," Lord Rastello said. "I'm sure anything you have to share will be more stimulating than discussing camp logistics." "A strange girl in a mask is speaking to Valkyrie gatherings in the city," Liam said. "They are keeping to themselves, for now, but it's been going on for several days now." Lord Rastello frowned as he absently swirled his wine glass. "What has she been saying?" "Her main message appears to be weakness without the drive to improve oneself is a sin. Everyone must strive towards the goal of becoming stronger." The men at the table exchanged curious looks. One of the knights snorted. "It seems you found Sir Louis' bastard daughter, Liam." "Sir Louis isn't nearly as well spoken," another scoffed. "He'll just grunt and punch you in the face. But her message is rather banal, isn't it? Common sense, even. Common sense to us, perhaps," Sir Jorge said. "For the commoners, though, I don't like where this may lead." "What's wrong with it?" Liam said. "Shouldn't everyone be doing their best?" Sir Jorge's eyes slid over to Lord Rastello. The noble set his wine glass down before speaking. "Broadly speaking, Liam," he said, "you're not wrong. In fact, we usually have the opposite problem. People tend to settle for enough. The issue here is that what this girl says lacks any direction. It is the place of the aristocratic establishment to identify men of talent and ensure that they are suitably placed in the greater order of things. It would be nice if society conveniently ordered itself, but it is well known that the independent pursuit of strength only gives rise to selfish interests that tend to detract from the greater good. Adventurers are perhaps the most well-known example of this." "Adventurers?" "That's right. I understand that many of the common folk see adventurers as veritable heroes for hire, but what the Adventurer Guild organization essentially does is hold the lives and livelihoods of the people for ransom. If you do not pay, then they do not act. At the same time, they benefit from the fruits of civilized society without contributing anything to it. They are the perpetrators of something along the lines of a protection racket. Imagine if the Adventurer Guild had instead been incorporated into the Royal Army. Exactly that happened during the Demon Emperor's invasion and the benefits were undeniable. The lives that could have been saved through the generations if they had always been there, well, I, for one, am relieved the parasitic blight that is the Adventurer Guild no longer exists in the Holy Kingdom." "Did this masked girl say anything else?" Sir Jorge asked. "She did," Liam answered, "but, based on what you just said, you're not going to like it." As one, the men at the table looked up from their meals. Lord Rastello prompted Liam to speak with his fork. "She's leveraging the plight of the citizens, my lord," Liam said. "Life in the royalist-occupied parts of the city continues to be hard and she's garnered a lot of support due to that." "What is she promoting?" Lord Rastello asked. "I'm not sure if she's promoting anything," Liam answered. "It's pretty confusing. She's stirring the pot, basically, cultivating discontent over how their districts have been managed." "So no calls to action?" Sir Jorge asked, encouraging people to become uncooperative or even violent. "No, sir," Liam shook his head. "She's well aware that anything like that will invite the wrath of the royalists, especially when they have over 100,000 troops outside the walls. The only other thing of note that she said was that the people should go to Lloyd's if things got really bad in Hobans." Lord Rastello's frown deepened at the last. "Lloyd's? With whatever destroyed the fleet out there? Surely, this is some mad woman we're dealing with here." "Shall we do something about her, my lord?" Sir Jorge asked. "Where has this woman appeared in the city?" Lord Rastello asked. "Not in the western quarter, I hope." "As far as the thief-takers know," Liam answered, "the northern and eastern quarters." The nobleman leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms and stroking his upper lip with a finger. "This sounds like a royalist problem to me," one of the knights said. "Letting this ride may produce some amusing results." "I agree," Sir Jorge nodded. If the Crown awards more of the city to us due to the problems this creates, it would be mortifying in the face of all the new witnesses. Liam, Lord Rastello asked, are you certain that this masked girl's activities won't result in any open civil unrest for the foreseeable future?
Yes, my lord, Liam answered. I can keep an eye on things if you'd like. You do that, the nobleman said.
We'll let this stew for the time being. The royalists will probably snub us if we try to help, anyway. Make sure you and the other thief-takers assigned to this aren't detected. Good work out there. With that, he was dismissed from the overseer's tent. The following evening, he went on his usual stroll after breakfast with Nat. On their way out to the highway, they stopped to watch the small crowd that had gathered around June's stand in the labor camp's market. See? Nat grinned. It's still on its little mannequin, Liam noted. It wasn't exactly a little mannequin. It was actually a super buff one with muscles and everything. June said it helped with sales, but she sure liked to touch it. Maybe that was part of the trick. We have to give people time to bid it up, Nat said. The auction will end a week before the next suit is enchanted. Liam nodded. It seemed that Nat was already more than confident and successful enough that she could stand on her own when his assignment was done. House Rastello might even let her have her own workshop by then, as they certainly wouldn't let go of such a talented artisan, woman or not. Once his shift started, Liam went looking for Ames. He found the thief-taker watching over the western end of the Western Plaza, which was even more crowded than the previous day. I don't know how we're supposed to keep track of all this, Ames said as Liam came up to stand beside him. We can't, Liam said. This is way too much for one person to watch over. Anything new about that masked girl from yesterday? Not really. She hasn't shown up here, anyway. What did Sir Jorge say? Lord Rastello wants me to check up on her once in a while, Liam said. We're not doing anything so long as she keeps going on like she has. Ames nodded at Liam's response. A new thorn in the royalists' side, eh? And here I thought all the new arrivals meant the end of our fun. Fun, huh? What do you think is going to happen in the next few weeks? Who knows, the thief-taker shrugged. Doesn't matter much what we think. We work for House Rastello and there's no reason that'll change. Liam supposed that should have been the expected response. Not only had House Rastello been wildly successful in Hobans, but they were also succeeding at instilling the strict, hierarchical rural values of the aristocratic establishment into everyone who worked for it. I guess I should go and figure out where that girl is, Liam said. Any ideas? She switches quarters every day, Ames replied. Should be somewhere on the east side, now. Thanks. He made his way across the city, skirting around the few thief-takers that the royalist houses had managed to deploy over the past few weeks. Despite their problems in Hobans, it seemed that they didn't see fit to deploy their best men against him, or maybe they did and what he saw was it. Finding the masked girl didn't take long, as her gatherings had grown large enough that they were using one of the Earth District's smaller plazas instead of the usual alley courtyards. The patrols and sentries working nearby didn't appear to notice that the area was slowly filling with locals rather than visitors from the camps outside. Not that the gathering was doing anything to draw attention to itself. Most were just chatting amicably as if it were a normal evening in Hobans. Which should be a big giveaway, I think. A normal evening in this part of Hobans doesn't have locals chatting amicably in a public plaza. He settled into the shadows of a chimney near where the masked girl was. As the sunset was replaced by torchlight, the girl visibly gathered herself before stepping atop a big crate in the corner of the plaza. Thank you, everyone, for coming, she said. I see many familiar faces, and I can't begin to express my appreciation for your continued support. Voices of encouragement rose in response to her greeting. The sentries nearest to the crowd watched the proceedings curiously, but still showed no signs of concern. By now, the girl continued, many of you understand that you have been purposely denied the means to leave behind the sin that is weakness. This is through no fault of your own, but through those who claim to manage the recovery of the Holy Kingdom on behalf of its citizens. Never mind being denied the freedom to cultivate strength, you have been denied your livelihoods. Starved of materials and even food, you were forced into a state of weakness, a state of sin. Technically, she wasn't wrong, but the way she associated everything with her underlying message of weakness being a sin made her sound more than a bit unhinged. Probably the most annoying thing about it all,
at least to him, was that one could say it was 3 or 4 steps out of phase with some of the Faith of the Six's tenets. She even claimed that her wisdom was passed down to her by the Sorcerer King, which was just plain insulting. The last part also meant that she had cobbled together her convictions out of an experience that couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 months in the past. Only the truly insane could think something like that could be turned into whatever she was doing. As the fervor of the crowd rose, the armsmen in the area started to consult amongst themselves. Eventually, several left the plaza and returned with more men. The Faceless One as several members of the crowd called her, seemed to pay the accumulation of patrols no mind. 30 minutes after the Faceless One started her address, a knight approached the gathering as his subordinates surrounded the crowd. Liam leaned forward, wondering how the confrontation would play out. "All right, break it up," the knight called out, "it's getting late. We've got another busy day tomorrow." The air went still as the people fell silent. Of course, the Faceless One smiled as she stepped off of her box. "You heard the good night, everyone. Please be safe, and have a good night." So that's how they're playing it. He should have probably expected it from the people of Robley. Some might consider the way that they did things slow, but it was more that they were both cautious and courteous in their unique way. Conflicts between people didn't escalate so readily, which gave them time to figure out their differences. Liam thought it was a better approach than the more volatile nature of Riastize's citizens. As the crowd quietly dispersed, a royalist thief-taker appeared not 5 meters away from Liam. He tailed the Faceless One from the rooftops as she exited the plaza and made her way southwest through the city. Liam followed him, pondering his next course of action. His orders were to maintain the deadlock in Hobans, which he had done thus far by helping House Rastello rise in prominence so it could hold its own against its royalist rivals. They were still far from being able to do so, however. The Faceless One and her followers presented a new piece for him to play with. While keeping the royalists unaware of her presence was no longer an option, Lord Rastello's idea of allowing her to continue sowing the seeds of dissent could still help Liam in his task. The Faceless One left the eastern quarter and entered the Water Gardens. Unlike the other parts of the city, the entertainment district was far from falling asleep. Men and women in various stages of drunkenness, arousal, and general merrymaking filled the colorful lanes along the area's many establishments. Was the Faceless One a prostitute by trade? It would explain why she was concealing her identity, and it would also explain the air of charisma that she exuded as she spoke. Those who worked in entertainment and hospitality were considered bards or something close to it, at least as far as the Sorceress Kingdom saw things. When the girl crossed over one of the canals crisscrossing the district, her stalker stopped to puzzle out a route. Liam took the opportunity to grab the thief-taker by the collar and toss him off of the rooftop. His short-lived shriek was followed by a splash as he hit the water below. People nearby went to see what had happened, but it looked and sounded like they thought the man was a drunk who lost his footing. That's not going to be the end of it, though. The Faceless One would most likely continue speaking to the citizens. Now that the royalists were aware of her, they would quickly conclude that they didn't like what she was saying. Their next response to her appearance would be faster and more effective. Fortunately, Liam knew just the person to get in their way.